Ever imagine having just one login for, well, practically everything online?
Like a master key?
Exactly. One key that unlocks social media, music, videos, games, even payments.
Uh-huh.
Sounds kind of sci-fi, right?
Yeah, like something out of a movie.
Well, that's what we're diving into today on the Deep Dive, this whole idea of one login for a whole digital universe.
Sounds ambitious.
It is, and it's already a reality for millions of users.
Yeah.
And the system behind it. That's what we're unpacking today, this VKID. You brought some really interesting stuff about this to the table. We got to dig into this. What it is, who's running the show, and why it might be popping up in some places you wouldn't expect.
Definitely. The articles and analyses you sent over paint a pretty fascinating picture of VKID and the company behind it, VK, formerly known as Mail.ru Group. They offer a huge range of digital services, really a major player in their region.
Absolutely. And that's what this deep dive is all about, right? Giving you, the listener, a clearer picture of VKID,
Yeah.
how it works, and this massive digital ecosystem it sits in. We want to connect some of those dots for you, maybe even trigger some of those aha moments about how interconnected our online lives really are. So let's get started. What exactly is id.vk.com, and what's this VKID all about?
Basically, id.vk.com, that's your entry point into VK's identity system. And VKID itself, you can think of it like a digital passport or a single sign-on, SSO for short. It's designed to be that one key to unlock a whole bunch of VK services, like their main social network, vContact, all their different messaging platforms, tons of content websites, and more digital products.
So you're saying one username, one password, and you're in the whole VK world.
Yeah.
Sounds convenient, but also kind of risky, putting all your eggs in one basket, digitally speaking.
That's a valid concern. And it goes even further. If you already have a vContact account, it's automatically linked to a VKID. You're already in the system, ready to jump between all their different services without creating a new account or remembering different logins.
Makes sense for their own services, I guess. But what really stood out to me was that some sources mentioned people getting redirected to id.vk.com when they tried to log into totally different platforms like TikTok. That's kind of unexpected.
It is interesting. It's not like VKID is meant to be the universal login for the entire internet, but the fact that it pops up on platforms like TikTok shows how these online identities are managed, these trends we see. Some platforms offer different unified login options just to make things easier for users. So in certain regions or through certain integrations, VKID might just show up as one of those options. Not its primary purpose, but it highlights how these systems can kind of creep beyond their original domain.
I see. So a bit of a side effect of how these things are built. Okay, that helps put it in perspective. So VKID is the key, but who are the key masters? Who is VK, the company behind all this?
Well, VK, as we know it today, started as vContact back in 2006, St. Petersburg. You'll hear those names used interchangeably sometimes, and vContact is still the top dog social network in Russia. What's interesting is their reach. They have a multilingual interface, over 80 languages, but most of their users are in Russia, the CIS countries, and Eastern Europe.
So it started as a social network like Facebook in its early days, but it's clearly become much more than that.
Yeah, way beyond that. They've grown into a massive digital ecosystem. It's not just about social media anymore. They have social platforms, sure, vContact, Odnoklassniki, which is like a network for classmates, and Moimir. But then they have all these other digital services, messaging apps, video and music streaming platforms, their own online payment system called VK Pay, and even a whole system of mini apps, VK mini apps. And VKID is like the glue holding it all together, that single sign-on for everything.
So they're aiming for their own, like, self-contained digital world.
In a way, yes. And they really made that clear in 2021 when Mail.ru Group officially changed their name to VK Company Limited. A real signal that they're all about this ecosystem strategy and a unified identity for their users.
And who's been steering the ship through all this?
Yeah.
Our sources pointed to one person in particular at the top.
Yeah, as far as we know, Vladimir Kiriyenko was the CEO of VK Company Limited.
No, the ownership structure of these big tech companies, that's always an interesting story. What's the story with VK?
It's gone through some changes over the years, started with Pavel Durov and some others, but eventually, Mail.ru Group, now VK Company Limited, took full ownership. But here's the big thing. In December 2021, control shifted again to entities with strong ties to the Russian government, specifically Gazprom Media and Sogaz. This change has a lot of people talking about where VK is headed and how much influence the government might have.
That does raise some eyebrows for sure. Okay, we've got a better idea of what VKID is and who's running VK. Let's get into the specifics of VKID itself. What are its main features and services?
The core function, as we've said, is identity authentication. It's that single login for the entire VK ecosystem, so you don't have to register separately for every service or remember a bunch of different passwords. Basically, your vContact Mergel registration becomes your VK ID, your passport to the VK world.
Makes sense. Definitely user-friendly. What about businesses? Does VKID offer anything specifically for them?
They do. It's called VK Business ID. Designed for businesses using VK's tools like advertising platforms and developer resources, including their app marketplace, Rustor, it's a centralized way for businesses to manage their presence across VK's ecosystem.
So convenience for individuals, efficiency for businesses, all within the VK sphere.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that VKID sometimes appears on third-party platforms. How does that
Yeah.
integration work?
Sometimes you'll see VKID offered as a login option on platforms outside the VK ecosystem. It lets users have a unified login experience across different online services, using their VKID to access partner sites or apps. It's all about making things easier for users so they don't have to create and remember countless logins.
Convenience seems to be a key theme here. What other advantages does VKID highlight for users?
They talk a lot about speed, how it's a quick, one-click login. They also emphasize the flexibility of authorization. You can use your phone number and password, SMS verification, or their passwordless option, OnePass. In fact, over 77% of VK users were primarily using OnePass as of 2023, which shows a big shift towards passwordless authentication.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. What else do they offer?
Another key feature is automatic data filling. Once you've entered your information into your VKID profile, it can automatically populate when you register for other VK services. Saves time and hassle. And importantly, they claim that only the necessary data is shared with each service. Security is a big focus too. They offer data confidentiality measures, two-factor authentication for extra security, and tools to track your account activity.
Security is always a concern. What else are they doing on that front?
They also promote a comfortable environment through voluntary data verification. Users can verify their identity using their accounts with Russian government services, Gosuslugi, and major banks like Sber ID, Tinkoff ID, and Alpha ID. If you verify this way, you get a gray checkmark on your profile, showing you're a verified, real person.
Interesting way to build trust, I guess. Anything else that makes it user-friendly?
Yeah. They offer account switching, so you can manage up to 3 accounts with one VK ID, even 5 on VK ads, useful for separating your personal and professional life online. And they have tight integration with VK Pay, their payment system. One-click payments and a central overview of your cards, receipts, and transactions.
It's all about creating a seamless experience within their world. Now let's talk about the connection between VKID and vContactee specifically. How do they work together?
VKID is the main way to log into vContactee. When you sign up for or log into vk.com, you're using your VKID. By doing that, you're also agreeing to the VK Ecosystem User Agreement and Privacy Policy, which you can find on id.vk.com. As we mentioned, if you're on vContactee, you automatically have a VKID. But here's the thing. A VKID can exist without a vContactee account.
Oh, interesting. So you could use VKID for other VK services, even if you don't use vContactee itself. Now, just to be clear, what's the difference between VKID and those profile or community IDs you see on vContactee?
That's a great question. It's important to distinguish between them. Think of it like this. Your VKID is like your passport to the entire VK world. It's managed on id.vk.com, and you use it to get into any VK service. It holds your basic information, security settings, payment details, and subscriptions for all those services. A profile ID or community ID on vContact, like bk.com txxxxxx, that's like your specific address within the vContactee country. It identifies your page or community page on that specific network. So VKID is for logging in and managing your identity across the entire VK ecosystem, while the other IDs are specific to vContactee.
That's a helpful analogy.
Yeah.
So with all these features and integrations, what's the big picture strategic importance of VKID for the company?
It's central to their strategy. VK wants to build this strong digital ecosystem and keep users engaged within their world. VKID makes it easy and convenient to use all their services, which encourages people to stay within their ecosystem. It also lets them integrate data across different services and track user behavior. Really valuable for things like targeted advertising and personalizing recommendations. And increasingly, it's becoming mandatory to use VKID for certain services. Since December 2023, you need it for VK ads, and since May 2024, you need it for VK Play developer accounts. This all points to how crucial VKID is for their future growth and how they manage users.
Makes sense from a business perspective. Now let's go back to those instances where users encounter VKID in unexpected places. What were some of those concerns?
Some users on platforms like Reddit reported being redirected to ed.vk.com, sometimes seeing the VK logo, when trying to log into unrelated services like TikTok. Understandably, it raises some red flags. They might not know about VK or its system and worry if their login details are at risk.
Definitely cause for concern. What are the most likely reasons for this?
A couple of possibilities. One is third-party authentication integrations. Some apps offer different social login options, and maybe they've mistakenly integrated or are offering a VKID module. Could be due to regional agreements or specific technical setups. Another possibility is related to regional policies or restrictions. Maybe in certain areas they have to offer VKID as a login option to comply with local rules or cater to user preferences.
So it might not always be malicious, but still something to be conscious about. What should users do if they see this unexpected VKID prompt?
Be cautious. If you see a VKID login when you're trying to access a different platform, double-check if it's an official login method for that platform. When in doubt, better safe than sorry. Either skip the VKID login or contact the platform's customer support to confirm it's legit. Protect your account.
Good advice. Now, we've talked a lot about VKID and the company behind it, but zoom out a bit. What does the wider VK ecosystem look like?
They have a ton of digital assets beyond vContact Day. Think of it in categories. Social networking and communication. They have Odnoklassniki, Moimir, the original Mail.ru email and portal, VK Messenger, even ICQ.
Wow, a real communication empire. What else?
Gaming is big for them, with My Games and VK Play. E-commerce and classifieds. They have Eula, working for job postings, and they were part of a joint venture with AliExpress Russia. On-demand services, they're in that too, with Delivery Club for food, Samacat for groceries, and transportation services like City Mobile and City Drive.
They're really trying to cover all the bases, huh?
Yeah, and that's not all. Content and media. They have VK Music, Boom for music streaming, VK Video, VK Clips for short videos, and Aven, a content recommendation service. They're also big in edtech with platforms like Skillbox, Geekbrains, and Uchi.ryu. And to tie it all together, they have their core platforms and tools. Rustore, their app store, VK Pay, VK Combo for loyalty programs, the Maruja Voice Assistant and Capsula Smart Speaker, VK Ads for advertising, and even a dating service called VK VK Dating. They also have some international services like My.com and CloudMail.ru.
It's mind-boggling how much they have going on, and VKID is meant to be the access point for all of it.
That's the idea. One ID to rule them all, so to speak. They want to create this all-in-one digital life solution, all accessible with one login.
It's a bold vision.
Yeah.
Can you give us some specific examples of how VKID is integrated across these services?
Take VK Pay, for example. It's seamlessly integrated, so you can make one-click payments within many services, and your transaction history is all there in your VKID account. VK Combo, their loyalty program, that's managed through VKID too. All your subscriptions and discounts in one place. Their Marusha Voice Assistant uses VKID to identify you and personalize services across devices. And the VK Mini Apps platform, which hosts tons of third-party mini programs within vContact Day, very likely relies on VKID for logins and data syncing. One of the biggest things is cross-service data sharing. The information you put in one VK service, like your address for a delivery, can be used by other services, like their ride-hailing app. Saves you from entering the same information over and over.
That level of integration definitely creates a very sticky ecosystem. Now, what about VKID's role outside VK's own services with external third parties?
We touched on this earlier. VKID is a login method for their advertising platforms, VK Ads and MyTarget. Since December 2023, it's been mandatory for VK Ads. It also acts as an SSO option for partners, including Rustore, VK Play, and some independent apps like Omit TV. And for developers, accessing certain VK APIs lightly requires authentication through VKID or a developer account.
So it's expanding its reach beyond the core VK world. What does that mean for user data? What kind of data are they collecting through VKID?
VKID collects data for authentication and identity verification, especially when you link your account with government services or banks. It's also used for advertising targeting, creating specific user groups for VK ads. Because it's integrated with so many services, VKID can gather a lot of data about you. Social interactions, communication, e-commerce, travel, even interactions with government services if you've linked those accounts.
That's a lot of data under one roof. What about privacy, security, and the regulations that apply to VK?
VKID is governed by the VK Ecosystem User Agreement and Privacy Policy, available on iday.vk.com. These documents lay out how they collect, process, and store your data. They say they use data for providing and improving services, personalization, including ads, security, and legal compliance. They can share data with third parties in certain cases, like to comply with the law, with your consent, with partners, and within the VK ecosystem to provide integrated services. You have certain rights, like accessing, correcting, and deleting your data, though there might be some limitations.
And what's the main legal framework that applies to them?
They mainly operate under Russian law, specifically the Federal Law on Personal Data, FZ 152. It's different from international regulations like GDPR. For one, FZ 152 says data on Russian citizens must be stored in Russia. Also, it allows for broader reasons to process data without your direct consent, like when it's needed to fulfill a contract. Russian law also gives security agencies wide access to user data and even encryption keys. And finally, the enforcement and penalties under FZ 152 aren't as strong as under GDPR.
So they're playing by a different set of rules compared to companies in other regions. What about their actual security measures?
They have a few things in place. Two-factor authentication for added security, they monitor for suspicious logins, and they use encryption, though they don't always share the specifics of their encryption methods. They also have a security management center to help users manage their security settings. And they run a bug bounty program where security researchers can find and report vulnerabilities in VKID and other services. They offer big rewards, sometimes millions of rubles, depending on the severity of the vulnerability.
That sounds like a proactive approach to security. Has VK had any major security breaches in the past?
There was a big one reported back in 2016, a leak of vContact user information. This was before VKID was as widely used as it is today, but it's a reminder that even big platforms can have vulnerabilities. And while a bug bounty program helps with external attacks, it can't prevent data access due to internal policies, legal requirements, or government directives.
That's an important point. Now let's talk about VK's ownership and its connection to the Russian government.
We mentioned that VK was acquired by Mail.ru Group, which became Vitae Company Limited. But the big shift came in December 2021 when entities linked to the Russian government, Gazprombank and Sogaz, took control. After that, Vladimir Kiriyenko, the son of a high-ranking Kremlin official, became the CEO. A lot of people see this as a sign of increased government control over the company.
Sounds like a turning point.
Yeah.
What are some external views on this ownership change?
Many sources, including official EU-sanctioned documents, call VK a state-controlled company. They point out that key people in VK's management and board are seen as tools for the government to control the internet in Russia. This raises concerns about censorship, government access to user data, and the platform's potential role in spreading state-approved information.
It's a worrisome picture for user privacy and free speech. Any recent developments that reinforce this trend?
VK is pushing for wider use of VKID across all their services, making it mandatory for new platforms. They're also integrating more with Russian state services like Gosuslugi, with potential plans to deliver government notifications through VK apps. Analysis suggests that local governments in Russia are using VK platforms to monitor public opinion and spread official information through projects like regional governance centers. Many see VK's growth as part of Russia's digital sovereignty strategy, creating a controlled internet space separate from global influences. The 2021 ownership change and CEO appointment are widely seen as the government cementing its control over VK. And again, the EU and others clearly label VK Company as state-controlled.
So greater alignment with the government seems to be the direction. Any major controversies surrounding VK in recent years?
Yes, a few. Ukraine banned VK services, including vKontakte, Odnoklassniki, and Mail.ru in 2017 as part of their sanctions against Russia. This shows the geopolitical implications of these platforms. vKontakte has also had issues with copyright and piracy, ending up on notorious markets lists by the US and EU for a while. And the environment for online freedom in Russia has gotten stricter, especially since the conflict in Ukraine escalated in 2022. This has undoubtedly impacted content moderation and free speech on VK platforms.
It's a complex and sensitive landscape.
Yeah.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. Any key takeaways for our listeners?
Here's the bottom line. VKID isn't just a login. It's the key to a huge, interconnected Russian digital world that's under significant state influence. It's convenient for accessing services, but it also brings up big questions about privacy, government oversight, and what happens when a tech giant with so much reach becomes so closely aligned with the government.
Definitely food for thought. What surprised you the most in our deep dive?
The fact that just trying to log into a different platform could land you on a VKID page, that was eye-opening. It shows how intertwined online identity management is behind the scenes and how our digital lives can intersect in ways we don't always realize.
That's a great point. It's a tangled web out there. So as we wrap up, what's one final thought you want to leave our listeners with about VKID and this vast ecosystem?
Given everything we've discussed, think about what it means when a company with VK's reach is so connected to the government, especially when it comes to data and online activity. As you use the internet, it's more important than ever to be aware of these dynamics and how they could affect your privacy and freedom online.